You're not going to believe what one of Canada's biggest banks just revealed, because this warning isn't coming from a headline, it's buried inside BMO's internal risk data. Right now, mortgage delinquencies in Ontario's suburbs have quietly doubled, and BMO is bracing for a wave of forced selling in 2026.
The housing market is basically in a recession. It is in a deep recession. And I think that the way to describe the housing market in general is in the following. The market is broken and we need to fix it in a very significant way. If you look at the market, really in a recession, that will last for another 2 years. I think it will not clear until 2028. The problem is, and that's a major problem, governments are starting to realize.
It's not a price dip, not a slowdown, forced sales. Where you miss a payment, the locks change and years of equity vanish in a weekend. And this isn't happening somewhere far away. It's happening in places like Hamilton, Durham, Peel, Niagara, the exact areas where regular families stretch to buy during the boom. And it's not just BMO, CIBC, TD, and RBC have all pulled back and set aside hundreds of millions in loss reserves.
What would you do if one day your neighbor, who you've known for years, you see him building a bomb shelter? Would you think, that guy's crazy? Or would you wonder, what does he know that I don't? It turns out banks right now are building a bomb shelter. Just this quarter, Canada's big six banks have set $4.3 billion aside to cover bad loans. That's almost double what they set aside in the first quarter of last year and more than 11 times what they set aside in the first quarter before that.
Banks are setting aside a larger amount of money than they ever have before.
Not just now, but in the previous quarter and in the quarter before that and the quarter before that.
The experts we spoke to say
they're preparing for more defaults from people who look safe on paper. So if the banks are stepping back now, ask yourself this: what do they see that most sellers don't? Because the window to move before you lose control is already closing. And what's coming next isn't a soft landing. It's a flood of spring listings, and almost no one is ready for it.
The potential for things to go wrong is greater than it ever has been.
So what do the big banks know that the rest of us don't?
In this video, you're going to see three things almost no one is telling Canadian homeowners right now. First, the hidden signals banks are using to quietly prepare for forced sales, and why they're already flashing red in Ontario's suburbs. Second, the one type of sale that nukes property values for an entire street, and how a single Brampton listing erased $134,000 in equity. Third, the two mistakes that wipe out your leverage before you even hit the market, and how to avoid them before your renewal letter shows up. Don't miss number 2. I personally watched millions in equity disappear because of it, and most sellers don't realize what happened until months after the sale is done. Here's the part no one's telling you. When banks move first, it's not to protect homeowners, it's to protect themselves. BMO isn't reacting to scary headlines. They're looking inside their own mortgage book. They know which clients are slipping behind, they know which regions are under stress, and they've already adjusted their risk models for 2026. That's your signal, because when banks tighten early, it means the risk is real, and it's already priced in. What they're seeing is simple. Delinquencies are rising in the suburbs first, not downtown cores, not luxury pockets, the suburbs, Hamilton, Durham, Peel, Niagara. Places that depended on cheap credit and move-up buyers, and it's not slowing down.
The majority of Canadians with a mortgage haven't actually seen any change to their monthly payments. There's a couple of reasons for this. One, more than half have a fixed rate. I have a fixed rate. It's only when my 5-year mortgage contract expires that I have to take a new higher rate. And you know what? More than 3/4 of all mortgages in Canada are coming up for renewal between now and the end of 2026. And it's a little unusual to have that many mortgages renewing in the same short period of time. Except it makes total sense because most Canadian mortgages are on either 3 or 5-year terms, and 3 to 4 years ago, it was a very ideal time to buy.
In fact, BMO says this trend will accelerate into 2026. That matters because delinquencies in Canada usually rise slowly and recover quickly. This time it's the opposite. And the reason comes down to one word: renewals. 60% of all Canadian mortgages are renewing by the end of 2026. Over a third of those were locked in between 1.5 and 2.5%. Now, those same homeowners got renewal offers between 4 and 6%. For a typical family, that's an extra $1,000 to $2,000 a month, overnight, with no time to adjust and nowhere to hide. That's why BMO is calling this a bear market, not a dip, not a temporary correction. A multi-year reset. RBC is backing this up. They're warning that inventory is at decade highs and price pressure is building in markets like Hamilton and Niagara. CIBC is even more blunt. They've officially labeled condos recessionary. Investor demand has collapsed and sellers are getting stuck. So what does this mean for you? It means the warning signs are already flashing. And if you wait for the headlines to tell you, you're already late, because this is how housing downturns actually unfold. Banks move first, then credit tightens, then confidence slips, then buyers disappear, then listings pile up, and then prices fall. In suburb-driven markets like Hamilton or Niagara, that sequence hits harder and faster because the buyers you need are the first to vanish. This isn't a soft landing. It's a reset already in motion. And the question is simple. Will you move before it hits? Because in about 60 seconds, I'm going to show you the exact story of a Brampton homeowner who lost $134,000 in equity, even though they never missed a single payment. It's the kind of sale that's already resetting the comps across Ontario. And if you're not watching for it, your street could be next. So here's what happens when this stops being theoretical. 6 weeks ago, one sale in Brampton flipped an entire neighborhood. A family did everything right, never missed a payment, and still lost $134,000 in equity. This is the story that makes everything we've talked about suddenly feel real. Because it didn't happen in 2020 or even 2022, it happened in mid-November 2025. And what it triggered is already reshaping entire blocks across Ontario's suburbs. But before I show you exactly how they lost that money, you need to understand why that one sale matters more than you think. When most people hear forced sale, they imagine something dramatic, multiple missed payments, legal notices on the door, locks changed in the middle of the night. But that's not what's happening right now. What's happening is quieter, harder to spot, and way more dangerous for homeowners who think they're still safe. Because the forced selling we're seeing today starts long before a lock ever gets changed.
What happens when you default on your mortgage? It's a pretty scary thought for a lot of homeowners out there, but it's a scenario that's becoming more real for more Canadians. And all of this pressure, well, it's adding up. CEOs of Canada's largest banks, they're warning that we may start seeing more mortgage defaults this year. And there are millions of bank customers out there whose mortgages are up for renewal this year, which means they could be facing higher mortgage rates as well when they go through that renewal process. Now, all of this, it means that there is less money to spend on groceries, on vacations, on clothing, and other living expenses. But at some point, there's going to be nothing left to cut. And that's going to leave people with very little financial wiggle room.
It starts the moment a renewal notice lands in your mailbox, your payment jumps by over $1,000 a month. Your amortization gets slashed, and your cash flow flips upside down in a single email. You list your home thinking you still have time, but the buyers, they've already pulled back. The comps, already reset by distressed inventory. The equity you think you're protecting, gone before your first serious showing. That's the wave BMO is watching for. And that's why their internal risk models are flashing red before the headlines ever do. Because once this cycle starts, it moves fast, and it doesn't hit the downtown core first. It hits the same suburbs that stretched during the boom, the kinds of neighborhoods you see all across the Golden Horseshoe. Here's your 60-second warning. In mid-November, CIBC ran a segment on a Brampton homeowner who bought in 2019, 5-year fixed at 1.89%. By 2022, they were up over $200,000 on paper. They felt safe, in control. Then their renewal hit in October 2025. Their payment jumped by $1,800 a month. Their lender cut the amortization from 30 years to 20. No real options, no time to adjust. They listed under pressure, hoping just to break even. Instead, 2 nearby power of sale listings hit the market first. Those 2 distressed sales nuked their appraisal by more than $100,000. Their home sold for $134,000 less than its peak valuation. And that equity was erased in under 30 days. Now you might be thinking, that could never happen to me. Maybe you're right. But here's what most people miss. What do you think happened to the value of the house next door? Because that's the real impact of a forced sale. It doesn't just hurt the one seller, it resets the comps for the entire street. Buyers see it, appraisers use it, banks lend against it, and your price gets dragged down with it. And that's exactly where most sellers lose their leverage, before the first showing ever happens. Now that you've seen how fast this can happen, here's what it actually means for you. If you're planning to sell this spring and you think you still have time, this next part matters, because timing a market like this is the difference between walking away clean and losing your last safety net. So let's break this down, because once you understand how sellers lose leverage, you'll know exactly what to do next. There are 2 traps that quietly wipe out seller power before the first showing ever happens. And I've watched both destroy equity across Hamilton in the last year. Here's the first one, listing too late into the spring surge. This looks harmless on the surface. You tell yourself you're just waiting for the market to warm up. But what you're really doing is stepping into the market after the buyer pool has already thinned, after the banks have already pulled back on pre-approvals, and after the comps have already shifted against you. Here's how it plays out in real life. You wait until May or June because that's when everyone lists. You see more signs on your street and you feel good about it. But what you're not seeing is what's happening inside those listings. Days on market creeping up, price reductions quietly stacking in the background, conditional offers falling apart over financing. By the time you list, you're not the exciting new option. You're just one more choice in a crowded shelf of similar homes. Buyers feel no urgency. They have options. They take their time, and the only lever you have left is price. So you chase the market down, 5,000 here, 10,000 there, until you finally hit a number that gets attention. On paper, you sold in the spring, but in reality, you just paid a premium for being late to the party. You gave up tens of thousands of dollars in leverage just because you followed the crowd instead of the data. That's trap number one. Here's trap number two, pricing off old comps in a falling market. This is the silent killer. It starts with a simple mistake. You look at what your neighbor got last year or even 6 months ago. You anchor to that number. You tell yourself your home is at least worth that much, maybe more. Your agent doesn't push back hard enough, or you list with someone who just wants the sign in the lawn. So you come out high, you price off last year's peak instead of this year's reality. And for the first week, you feel fine. You get some showings, you hear nice feedback, but no one writes a serious offer because serious buyers are staring at the same bank data we've been talking about. They know rates are higher. They know more listings are coming, and they're not willing to overpay to solve your problem. So your listing sits, your days on market climb, and suddenly you look stale. Buyers start asking, what's wrong with that one? Now you're not negotiating from a place of strength. You're defending a price the market already rejected. So you cut and cut again until you're no longer fighting for top dollar. You're fighting just to keep up with the last for sale on your street. That's how good sellers with good homes end up chasing bad comps all the way down. Not because they're greedy, but because they priced off the past in a market that's resetting in real time. So here's what you do instead. You stop thinking like a hopeful seller and start thinking like the banks that are already months ahead of you. You plan your timing around when buyers are strongest, not when listings are most crowded. You price into the market that's coming, not the one you wish you still had. You get in front of the flood of spring inventory instead of being buried underneath it, and you build a plan now before your renewal letter shows up. Because once that envelope lands in your mailbox, your options shrink with every month that goes by. If you're a homeowner in Hamilton, Ancaster, Stony Creek, or Burlington, and you're even thinking about selling in the next 12 to 24 months, this is the moment to get ready, not when you're already under pressure. That's exactly why I put together a free seller guide. 7 steps Hamilton sellers are using right now to protect their equity in a market the banks are already calling a bear. Inside, I walk you through the exact framework I use with clients. How to read your renewal risk before the bank ever calls you. How to time your listing so you're not competing with distressed sales. How to price in a way that attracts real buyers without giving your equity away. And the one conversation you need to have with your lender before you ever put a sign on your lawn, if you want that playbook. So you're not guessing your way through the next 18 months. You can download it free. The link is in the description. And if you're sitting in a home in Hamilton or the surrounding area and you want to see how all of this applies to your exact street, your renewal date, your numbers, reach out. We'll go through the data together. No pressure, no gimmicks, just a clear look at where you stand and what your options really are. Because in a market like this, you don't get rewarded for waiting and hoping it all works out. You get rewarded for being early, for understanding the game the banks are already playing, and for protecting your equity before it becomes someone else's opportunity. So watch this again if you need to. Grab the guide while it's still free. And before you make any big decision about your home in Hamilton, make sure you're acting on what the banks are actually seeing, not what last year's headlines told you.